in the sleepy town of Fairview, Indiana, where cornfields stretched endless and the high school's Friday night football games were gospel. Ethan Parker walked the halls like a ghost. At 16, he was a quiet sophomore with shaggy brown hair and a sketchbook tucked under his arm, his sneakers scuffing the linoleum of Fairview High as whispers trailed him like shadows. It was a crisp October morning, the air sharp with fallen leaves. When disaster struck, Ethan's backpack snagged on a locker, spilling its guts across the crowded corridor. Books thudded, pencils rolled, and there it was, a drawing, slipped from his sketchpad. Two boys holding hands under a willow tree, their faces soft, unguarded. Time froze as a jock snatched it up, his laugh slicing the air. "Yo, Parker's a fag." And in 30 seconds, Ethan's secret was a wildfire, roaring through the school, ready to burn him alive. Fairview wasn't kind to kids like him. The town clung to old ways, church on Sundays, flags on porches, a code where boys chased girls and anything else was sin. Ethan had known he was gay since 8th grade, a truth he'd buried deep, locked behind sketches he hid from his dad, Tom, a factory worker who'd rant about those people over supper, and his mom, Linda, who'd nod and pray harder. School was no refuge here. Jocks ruled the cafeteria, cheerleaders giggled over prom dates, and teachers turned blind eyes to the taunts scrawled on lockers. Ethan loved art, his pencil a lifeline to a world where he could breathe. But even that felt dangerous now. The drawing wasn't just lines, it was him, raw and real. And as the bell rang, a crowd circled, phones snapping pics, voices jeering, "Queer! Freak!" Their eyes pinning him like a bug on a board. He scrambled to grab his things, heart hammering, the sketch crumpling in his fist as he bolted for the bathroom, slamming the stall door shut. His breath came fast, ragged, the tile cold against his back as laughter echoed outside. Parker's done for. This wasn't just a bad day, it was the end of hiding. The start of a war he'd never wanted. Fairview High was a battleground, its halls a maze of judgment, and Ethan, with his quiet dreams and secret heart, was now its target. He clutched the drawing, its ink smudging under his thumb, and wondered if he'd ever escape the weight of who he was in a place that hated it so much. If that gut-wrenching moment hooked you, hit that like, share this with someone who feels it, and subscribe to Heart Stories. We're diving deep into Ethan's fight next. Ethan Parker's world unraveled faster than a thread pulled from a sweater, the halls of Fairview High turning into a gauntlet overnight. By lunch, the photo of his sketch, two boys holding hands, a secret he'd poured onto paper, had spread like wildfire across Snapchat, Instagram. Every phone buzzing with the venom of a small-town mob. "Faggot" was scrawled in black marker across his locker by second period, the word jagged and bold. A declaration that echoed in the snickers bouncing off the cinder block walls. Ethan kept his head down, his sketchbook clutched like a shield, but the air was thick with eyes. Jocks smirking over trays of tater tots, girls whispering behind manicured hands, even the janitor glancing sideways as he mopped. He'd gone from invisible to infamous in hours, a ghost no more. Now a target painted bright red in a school that thrived on conformity. It didn't take long for words to turn to fists. After gym, Ethan lingered in the locker room, hoping to dodge the crowd, but the door slammed open, and 3 seniors stormed in. Tyler, the quarterback with a buzz cut and a mean streak, leading the pack. "Hey, fairy boy," Tyler sneered, snatching Ethan's towel and tossing it into a puddle of sweat-streaked tile. Ethan froze, his heart a jackhammer. But before he could bolt, they grabbed him, meaty hands pinning his arms, dragging him to a steel locker. "Let's see how you like this," Tyler grunted, shoving him inside, the metal banging shut as Ethan's knees hit the cramped space, his sketchbook tumbling to the floor. The lock clicked, their laughter a muffled roar outside. "Stay in there, queer," and Ethan pounded the door, his fists bruising, his voice a raw scream swallowed by the dark. Minutes stretched to an eternity, the air stale, his breath shallow, until a coach finally pried it open, his "What's going on?" gruff but indifferent, letting the boys scatter with smirks. The torment didn't stop there. By week's end, Ethan's books were shredded, pages fluttering like confetti across the quad, his name etched into bathroom stalls with slurs no kid should read. Graffiti bloomed on the school's brick wall, "No gays at Fairview." Red paint dripping like blood, a message that stung worse than the bruises blooming on his ribs from a shove in the stairwell. Lunch became a battlefield. He'd sit alone, tray untouched, as ketchup packets pelted his back, a chorus of freak ringing in his ears. Friends he'd once had, Jake from art class, Sarah from homeroom, vanished, their seats empty beside him, their eyes averted in the halls. Ethan was a pariah, a walking wound, and Fairview High was the blade, cutting deeper with every passing day. Home offered no sanctuary. Word reached his parents through a call from the principal. "Mr. Hayes," his voice clipped over the line. "We've got a situation with Ethan." That night, the kitchen turned into a courtroom, the fluorescent light buzzing harsh above the table. Tom, Ethan's dad, paced in his steel-toed boots, his face red as the factory whistle blew in his blood. "What the hell's this about?" "Ethan," he barked, slamming the phone down. "You drawing that crap, making us look like fools?" Ethan shrank. His "I didn't mean" to cut off by Tom's roar. "Didn't mean? Whole damn town's talking. My kid's some kind of pervert. You're not gonna act like that under my roof, get that straight." Linda hovered by the sink, her hands twisting a dish rag, her eyes darting between them. "Tom, maybe he's just confused," she murmured. But her voice trembled, her silence louder than words. Ethan stared at the linoleum, the sketch crumpled in his pocket, burning like a coal. His dad's "fix yourself or else" ringing in his ears as he fled to his room, the door slamming shut on a house that felt like a cage. The next day, the school called again. Graffiti, fights, Ethan's name at the center. Tom's rage boiled over at supper, his fork stabbing the table. "You're ruining us, church folks staring." Guys at work laughing. "You stop this nonsense now." Linda's "maybe we should talk to someone" was drowned by Tom's "no shrinks fixing this, he's got a man up." Ethan sat mute, his stomach churning, the weight of their rejection heavier than the locker's steel. He'd lost his school, his friends, now his home. Fairview's hate had seeped everywhere, a flood he couldn't outrun. That night, alone in his room, the walls closed in. The sketchbook his only witness as tears stained the page, his pencil idle, his spirit cracking under a town that wouldn't let him breathe. Ethan Parker's life at Fairview High had crumbled into a heap of ash. The days after his sketch leaked, stretching into a nightmare he couldn't wake from. By Monday, the taunts were a chorus: fag, sissy, perv, echoing through the halls like a twisted school anthem. The words branded into his skin deeper than the bruises from the locker incident. He stopped going to class, his sneakers no longer scuffing the linoleum, his sketchbook abandoned under his bed as he holed up in his room, blinds drawn tight against the October sun. The world outside buzzed on, football cheers on Friday nights, church bells on Sundays, but Ethan was a shadow, curled under a quilt his mom had sewn, the fabric damp with silent tears he didn't bother wiping away. Fairview had won. It had beaten him down. And for the first time, he wondered if disappearing might be easier than fighting a town that hated him for breathing. Home was a prison now, the air thick with tension that choked him worse than the locker's steel. Tom's anger had hardened into a cold wall. Supper passed with his dad's eyes fixed on the TV, the clink of his fork a metronome to silence. His only words a grunted, "You going back tomorrow?" Ethan's no drew a glare. Tom's "you're making this worse," a growl that shook the table. Linda tried, her voice soft as she slid a plate of meatloaf his way. "You gotta eat, honey," but her hands trembled, her eyes darting to Tom, her quiet a betrayal Ethan felt in his bones. One night, Tom's patience snapped, his fist slamming the counter as he roared, "Folks at work won't shut up. My own kid's a disgrace. You're killing us. Ethan, quit hiding and face it." Ethan fled upstairs, the door banging shut, his chest tight with a scream he couldn't let out. He stared at the ceiling, the cracks spidering like his thoughts, dark, jagged, whispering that maybe he didn't belong anywhere. Not here. Not ever. The school didn't care he was gone. "Mr. Hayes called once. His "we're handling it" clipped over the line. But the graffiti stayed. Ethan's a queer, red paint glaring on the wall, a monument to his absence. Rumors swirled. Kids said he'd run off. Others that he'd turned worse, and the phone stayed silent. No text from Jake or Sarah. No lifeline from the life he'd known. Ethan's room became a tomb, the walls closing in. His sketchbook untouched, its pages a mirror he couldn't face. He'd sit for hours, staring at the pencil on his desk, its lead dull like his spirit, the weight of Fairview's hate pressing until his lungs burned. One night, alone with the hum of the house, He traced a finger over the window pane, the cold glass a temptation. Jump, vanish, end it. But the thought dissolved into exhaustion, his head dropping to his knees, too tired even for despair. Then came Ms. Harper. She was the art teacher, a wiry woman with gray streaks in her hair and a voice that cut through the fog. She'd noticed Ethan's drawings before, quiet sketches of trees, faces, dreams, and when he stopped showing up, she didn't let it slide. Tuesday morning, she knocked on the Parkers' door, her boots firm on the porch, her "I need to see Ethan" brushing past Linda's stammered "He's not well." Ethan shuffled down, eyes hollow, expecting a lecture, but Ms. Harper knelt, her gaze steady. "I saw your sketch, the one they're all riled up about," she said, "and it's damn good. Ethan, you've got something, don't let him take that." She pulled a flyer from her bag, an underground art club. Off school, a haven for kids like him. "Come tomorrow," she urged. "Just try." Ethan clutched the paper, its edges creasing under his fingers, a flicker of something, hope, stirring in the dark. That night, the town's judgment roared louder. Fairview's church held a meeting, Ethan's name a whispered curse as parents packed the pews, their voices sharp over hymnals. "We can't have this in our school." And a deacon snapped, "It's a sin, spreads like a disease." Tom didn't go, but Linda did, her coat tight as she sat in the back, her silence a nod to their fears. Word reached Ethan through a cracked window, neighbors muttering as they passed. Parker kids' trouble, and he sank deeper. The flyer his only tether. Wednesday dawned gray, rain tapping the roof, and Ethan stood at his door, heart pounding. The paper in his pocket a fragile lifeline. He'd hit bottom, school a war zone, home a cage, Fairview a noose, but Ms. Harper's words echoed. A thread he grabbed with shaking hands. He slipped out. Hood up, the art club a gamble, a chance to breathe in a world that wanted him gone. Ethan Parker stood at the edge of his bedroom window, the rain streaking the glass like tears he'd stopped shedding. The crumpled flyer from Ms. Harper clutched in his hand. Fairview's hate had driven him to a cliff, school a battlefield, home a jail, and for days, he'd teetered there, the dark whispering easy-outs he didn't dare name. But the art club flyer, its ink smudged from his grip, was a lifeline he couldn't ignore. Ms. Harper's words, "You've got something," a faint pulse in the silence. Ethan's room was a fortress of shadows, the walls plastered with old sketches, trees, birds, faces he'd dreamed up, but none like the one that had ruined him. The two boys holding hands, a truth he'd hidden since 8th grade. Now, with the town's judgment roaring outside and his family's rejection echoing within, he faced a mirror he'd avoided too long. Who was he? Really? In a world that wanted him gone? The memory hit like a freight train. 8th grade, a humid June day, Ethan doodling in the back of math class when he'd caught himself staring at Sam. A boy with freckles and a laugh like summer. His pencil had traced Sam's jaw without thinking. A sketch he'd torn up in panic, his heart racing as his dad's voice boomed in his head. "Them queers ain't right. Ethan, it's a sin." Sundays at Fairview Baptist had drilled it in, sermons about fire and brimstone. Tom nodding along, Linda clutching her Bible. Their whispers at supper about a cousin gone wrong, cementing the shame. Ethan had buried it, locked his heart in pencil lines. But the feeling lingered, blooming quiet and fierce, a secret he'd guarded till that damn drawing slipped out. Now, staring at the flyer, he saw it clear. He'd been running from himself as much as from Fairview, and the weight of that lie was crushing him. He sank to the floor, back against the bed, the quilt slipping as he pulled his sketchbook from its hiding spot. The pages flipped under his trembling fingers, landscapes, comics. Then the boys, their hands linked, a piece he'd drawn late one night when the house slept, a dream he'd never dared voice. It was him, raw and real, and Fairview had turned it into a weapon, jocks locking him in steel, kids shredding his books, his own dad calling it nonsense. Ethan's chest tightened. A war raging inside, hide again, be the son Tom wanted, the kid Fairview could stomach or fight, claim the boy he'd buried, risk losing it all. The flyer stared back. The art club a gamble, safety in shadows or a spotlight he couldn't escape. He traced the ink. Ms. Harper's "Don't let him take that," a dare he wasn't sure he could take. Outside, the town's scorn grew louder. The church meeting had sparked a fire, flyers pinned to telephone poles, Protect our kids. A petition circling to cleanse the school. Ethan overheard Linda on the phone. Her voice shaky. He's not a bad boy. Just mixed up. Defending him to a neighbor who'd sneered, "Keep him away from mine." Tom stayed silent now. His anger a brooding cloud, but his boots stomped harder. His "this ain't over" a threat Ethan felt in his marrow. Society wanted him erased. Church, school, home, and Ethan wondered if they were right, if he was the flaw, the stain. But then he'd see Sam's face in his mind, the flutter in his chest no sin could kill, and the pencil in his hand twitched, a lifeline he couldn't let go. "Miss?" Harper's voice broke through again. Her flyer a beacon. Ethan grabbed it, smoothing its creases, and slipped out that Thursday, hood up against the drizzle, his heart a drumbeat as he reached the art club's hideout. An old shed behind the library, its windows taped with butcher paper. Inside, 5 kids sat on crates, paint cans scattered, their eyes curious but kind. Ms. Harper nodded. "Glad you're here," and handed him a canvas. "Draw what hurts," she said. "No pity, just truth." Ethan hesitated, then let it spill. Jagged lines of lockers, fists and shadows. A boy alone under a willow. Tears and ink. It wasn't safe. Not yet. But it was him, a step from the dark. The club was secret, entries for a school exhibit anonymous, and Ethan chose hide the name, show the pain, face himself even if Fairview wouldn't. He left that night, canvas tucked away, the rain cool on his face, a flicker of defiance in his chest. Society loomed, church bells tolling, Tom's glare waiting, but Ethan had drawn it, owned it, a piece of who he was. The war wasn't over. He might lose his family, his place, but he'd stopped running from the mirror. The pencil was his now, not theirs, and that was enough to breathe again. Ethan Parker's hands trembled as he stood in the dim shed behind Fairview's library, the art club's secret haven, his latest canvas propped against a crate. It was late November, the air biting with frost, and the school's anonymous art exhibit loomed, a chance to bare his soul without a name. Or so he'd thought. The painting was raw, a boy hunched in a locker, fists raining down, shadows curling like smoke, a single willow tree glowing faint in the corner, a piece of Ethan's pain spilled in acrylic. Guided by Miss Harper's steady let it out. He'd slipped it into the exhibit stack. Unsigned. A whisper of himself he could still hide. But when the gym doors swung open that Friday night, the spotlight hit, and Ethan's world flipped. Someone had scrawled his name across the frame, outing him to Fairview High in a blaze he couldn't douse. The exhibit buzzed with parents, kids, teachers, booths of watercolors and clay lining the bleachers, but Ethan's painting stole the show. A lightning rod in the crowd. Whispers turned to shouts as Tyler, the quarterback, pointed, his voice booming over the chatter. "That's Parker's. The fag did this." His buddies snickering, phones flashing pics, faces twisted, moms clutching purses, dads muttering disgrace. A teacher's "who let this in?" sharp as a slap. Ethan stood frozen by the punch bowl, his hoodie no shield, his breath shallow as eyes pinned him. A sea of judgment crashing over the gym. Harper stepped up. Her "it's art. Not a crime drowned by a mom's 'it's filth, get it out.'" The painting stayed, but Ethan's anonymity shattered, his truth now a public wound. The backlash was swift, brutal. By Monday, the school board called an emergency meeting. The principal's office a war room as parents raged, "He's corrupting our kids." Their "protect our values" flyers littering the lot. Ethan was hauled in. "Mr. Hayes' you're suspended, 2 weeks a cold decree." His "we can't have this" chaos echoing as Ethan stared at the floor, his sketchbook heavy in his lap. Kids didn't wait. Hallways erupted. "Ethan's done" scrawled on lockers. A football jock shoving him into a trash can, laughter ringing as he sprawled in the filth. But then, a shift. 3 art club kids, Mia, Jake, and Samir, pushed through. Mia's "leave him alone," fierce, their hands pulling him up, a lifeline he hadn't expected. They'd seen his work, felt its weight, and stood by him, a tiny wall against the storm, home cracked wide open. Tom stormed in that night, his factory boots thudding, the suspension note crumpled in his fist. "You're ruining us. Church, work, now this," he roared. His "I'll fix you yet" a threat as he yanked Ethan's sketchbook, tearing pages, willows, boys, dreams into confetti. Linda's Tom
Stop!
broke through, her voice quaking as she grabbed his arm, tears spilling. He's our son. Maybe we're wrong. She choked. Her doubt a crack in the armor Ethan hadn't seen. Tom froze. You're taking his side? A growl. But Linda held firm. Her, I don't know anymore, a whisper that shook the room. Ethan stood, fists clenched. The shredded art at his feet a mirror to his heart, torn. But still his. I'm not broken, he said, voice steady, the first time he'd claimed it aloud. And Tom's glare faltered, Linda's sob filling the silence. School turned feral after the exhibit. The suspension didn't stop the hate. Texts flooded Ethan's phone. Kill yourself, freak. Anonymous numbers from kids he'd once known. A brick sailed through his window at dawn, glass shattering. A note tied tight, go away, the town's verdict in jagged ink. But Ethan didn't bend. Mia texted, we've got your back. And Ms. Harper called. Her, you're stronger and they know, a spark. He sat on his bed, the canvas's image burned in his mind. Those fists, that willow, and knew hiding was over. Fairview could rage, Tom could tear, but Ethan couldn't be the boy they wanted. He'd lost school, risked home, but gained a voice, small and shaking, a truth he'd fight for. No matter the cost. Ethan Parker's suspension ended under a December sky heavy with snow. Fairview High looming like a beast he'd once fled. 2 weeks had hardened him, the brick through his window, the shredded sketchbook. The hate texts piling like ash, but they'd also lit a fire. He wasn't the boy who'd hid anymore. He was done bending for a town that spat him out. With Mia's "We're with you" echoing in his pocket and Ms. Harper's "You're stronger and they know" ringing in his ears, Ethan hatched a plan, not to run, but to stand. He'd return to school, not as a ghost, but a voice, using the only weapon he had, his art. The night before, he'd stayed up, sketching a new piece, a boy under a willow, fist fading to open hands, story of hurt turning to hope, and now, he clutched it, ready to face the storm. Monday morning, Ethan walked through the double doors, his hoodie swapped for a flannel shirt, his sketchbook bold in his grip. The halls buzzed, jocks glaring from the lockers, whispers slicing the air. But Mia, Jake, and Samir flanked him, a shield of mismatched kids in paint-stained jeans. Ms. Harper had cleared it, a lunchtime talk in the courtyard. No mic, just Ethan and his truth. Word spread fast, and by noon, the quad filled, Tyler and his crew smirking up front, teachers hovering, 100 eyes waiting for a fall. Ethan stepped onto a bench, snow crunching under his sneakers, his voice shaky but rising. This is me, he said, holding the sketch high. Not a freak, not a sin, just a kid who draws what he feels. You've hit me, locked me up, broke my stuff. Why? 'Cause I'm gay? That's on you, not me. The crowd rippled. Tyler's "shut up, fag," sharp, his buddies jeering. But Mia snapped back, let him talk, and a hush fell, tense and jagged. Ethan unrolled the canvas, its lines stark against the gray day, a boy beaten, then standing, hands reaching out. This is what you did, he said, but it's not who I am. I'm tired of hiding. You don't have to like me, but you don't get to erase me. His voice cracked, but he pushed on. I'm here, same as you, deal with it. A few laughed, Tyler chucking a snowball that missed, but others froze, girls from art class nodding. A quiet jock in the back clapping slow, uncertain. Ms. Harper stood by, her keep going a lifeline. And Ethan did, his words raw, his art a mirror Fairview couldn't dodge. The fallout split the school. Tyler's gang stormed off. There he's done a hollow bark. But whispers shifted, some kids lingered. Eyes on the sketch. A sophomore muttering, that's messed up. What they did. By day's end, a teacher, Mr. Cole, the gruff history guy, pulled Ethan aside. His that took guts, gruff but real. A crack in the wall. The next week, a handful joined the art club, 5. Then 10, kids who'd never spoken up. Their own sketches piling up. Stories of hurt and hope. Ethan led them, his voice steadier, turning the shed into a sanctuary where Fairview's rules didn't reach. The graffiti stayed. The glares too, but the jeers dulled. A fragile truce born from a bench and a boy who wouldn't break. Home trembled too. Linda slipped into the courtyard that day, her coat tight, eyes wet as Ethan spoke. She didn't clap, Didn't cheer, but she stayed. Her "I saw you soft that night over supper," Tom grunted, his fork stabbing meatloaf. But Linda pushed. "He's ours. Tom, he's not wrong for feeling this." Tom's "I don't get it" was hard, but he didn't yell. His eyes flicking to Ethan's sketch on the fridge, taped up by Linda, a quiet stand. Days later, he fixed the busted window. His "keep your damn art safe" gruff, but there, a step Ethan clung to. Linda hugged him after. Her "I'm trying" a whisper. And Ethan nodded. The ache easing, a bridge half built. Fairview didn't flip, church flyers still circulated. Tyler's glare still burned, but Ethan's talk rippled. A girl left a note, "I'm like you. Thanks," and the club grew. A whisper against the roar. He'd risen, not to win them all, but to claim his ground. A kid with a pencil shifting a town one stroke at a time. Winter softened into spring in Fairview, Indiana. The snow melting into muddy patches around Fairview High, where Ethan Parker had carved a fragile place. Months after his courtyard stand, the school wasn't a fairy tale. Tyler's glares still cut. Graffiti lingered on the walls, but Ethan walked taller. His sketchbook a badge, not a burden. The art club had grown. A shed once secret, now a quiet rebellion. 20 kids painting, sculpting, their stories spilling onto canvas. Ethan at the helm. He wasn't a hero, just a boy who'd stopped hiding, his pencil tracing willows and hands that no longer flinched. Fairview hadn't embraced him. Church ladies still whispered. Some lockers stayed slammed, but the taunts dulled. A few nods replaced sneers, a small shift born from a sophomore who dared to speak. Home mended slow, stitches rough but holding. Linda hung Ethan's sketches on the fridge. Her "you're good at this" soft over breakfast. Her hand steady now when she hugged him. Tom didn't talk much, his "keep out of trouble" gruff as he fixed the porch. But he'd stopped tearing pages, his silence less cold, his eyes lingering on Ethan's art with a frown that wasn't rage. One Sunday, he skipped church, sat with Ethan on the steps, the air thick with unsaid words. "Don't get it," he muttered. "But you're my kid." It wasn't acceptance. Not fully. But it was enough, a crack in the wall, a start Ethan hadn't dreamed of. Linda smiled more, her "I love you" a balm, and Ethan felt the cage loosen. Home a place he could breathe again. The town shifted too, inch by inch. The art club's work spread, posters in the library, a mural on the shed. Kids like Sarah slipping notes, "Thanks for being you." A teacher started a tolerance talk. Mr. Hayes grumbling but letting it slide. Fairview didn't change overnight. Church flyers still preached. Some parents still shunned, but Ethan's voice had planted seeds. A ripple in a pond too still. He'd sit under the school's lone willow at dusk, sketching boys who laughed. Free, his heart lighter. Not whole but healing. He'd lost friends, taken hits, but gained a truth he wouldn't trade, a life carved by his hands, not theirs. Ethan didn't win Fairview, he didn't need to. He'd risen for himself. A gay kid in a hard town, proving strength wasn't silence but standing when the world pushed back. His art spoke where he couldn't. A quiet fight that shifted a few hearts, a legacy of pencil and grit. This isn't about heroes, it's about living true, one messy step at a time. What would you risk to be you? Share below. Ethan's story might be yours too. If it moved you, hit like, share with someone who gets it, and subscribe to Heart Stories for more.